Well folks, I'm building another massive wargaming board, and this time, it's going to change Warhammer forever. Last month we kicked off my brand new Dawn of War Warhammer campaign with a massive Space Marine scenery build, but today, we've got something much more interesting on the table. We're building a whole Orc civilization. We are ripping off our power armor and going on a mighty wah as we construct the mighty base of the Orcs. We have got a huge set of modular structures to build today that need to be able to come together to make anything from small orcifications right up to massive greenskin infestation.
It's Orc Day and Bo and Bodhi are smashing through Orc scenery. So this is like my horde of the GW plastic, the Octarius Orc Ruins. I bought like 5 boxes of it, I got heaps of it piled up, but I did already start it sort of this time last year, and I've got some of these pieces that I have shipped over. But these are in a bit of a sorry state.
Now the centerpiece for our Orc civilization is going to be a super custom bit of kitbashed madness, the Mech Workshop Orc infested skyscraper of Big Mech Cogfist Steel Snapper. And to see that beast come to life, we need to first take a short trip down memory lane. My Orcs won't be bowing down to this first floor only bullshit. They want to live in skyscrapers. A few years back, when Games Workshop released their new Orc scenery, I bought an absolute bucket load of it, but I was pretty unhappy with how damn flexible it was. It could make a few limited shapes, but it was awful for modularity. So I set about kitbashing an insane Orc skyscraper. If you want to see this full build video, it is linked down below, but we're just gonna blast through the important bits now to set up the rest of our city building journey. Earlier in this Hive City series, we put together these two buildings. The plain, of course, now forms an amazing walkway between the two buildings, which will soon be infested by Orcs. It looks like we're smashing GW kits to pieces once again. I've got a nice mix of Orc walls, floors, and some specific Mech Workshop pieces, Orc barricades, and a few bits left over from the Vertigus Manufactorum terrain. The two Orc main structures are a short side wall and a long front wall with a door, and then an upper floor that slots in behind a low barricade. Now it's time to start moving on to our interior. This level is going to be the workshop for our mech boy, where he works on repairing the crashed sneak plane, as well as overseeing his grok gang's work on the weapon emplacements. I sprinkled a whole heap of tile grout around the place, brushing it into all the joints and crevices, and then soaking it in isopropyl alcohol and pipetting matte scenic sealant from my online store, Zorpazorp.com. This acts as the perfect gap filler as well as becoming an additional bonding agent, as when activated by moisture and varnish, grout becomes a fantastic adhesive. Plus, it's a great start for our rubble profile. We will do more to this lower level, but now the structural work is done, I'm going to finish the upper level first, so I grabbed another style of Orc structure from the new Kill Team box and set to work on cutting out the front door. I glued together the wall structure as one solid piece and glued it down onto the floor tiles. To access the very top floor, I threw in a second ladder over the iron sheet, which leads up the hatch into the upper level. So, present day Lockie back here, we can see that I've gone to a bunch of effort to make this work as a pretty permanent Orc structure, and we've got some real character in the building, but it has of course lost any sense of modularity, which is fine for a big centerpiece, but we need all of this Orc scenery for my new campaign, Dawn of War Warhammer. Now, if you haven't seen it, over on Zorphammer, my second channel dedicated to the gaming aspect of the Warhammer hobby, I'm building an entire campaign and custom rule set to replicate the Dawn of War video game on the tabletop, which means, of course, that we need structures to represent the huge variety of Orc buildings from the game. If you'd like to see some Dawn of War gameplay, check out the 2 battle reports. Yes, the second one is live now as well. They're over on Zorphammer, which is linked down in the description. Now, this Orc skyscraper is going to function as one of the Orc bases in the campaign. In fact, it's actually going to be a custom narrative mission objective, so we can really do something special with it. Back in 2021, Past Lockie built a gangway all around the building to make it really playable, so I've got lots of spots to garrison my Orcs. So let's have a look at what else these kits can do and how we can use them to build our Orc civilization. So with those final details, the bulk of the building is done, and it's time to begin work on our second structure in the very top floor of the Basilicanum. I'm going to begin by whacking together this awesome little fuel tank setup from the Octarius box. I then started expanding the floor plan with a huge sheet of corrugated iron, cutting it down to size and then lining up the perfect angle for another orc structure. A metric fuck ton of superglue, and she's mounted beautifully, and I'm loving the off-kilter nature of the walls, at complete odds with the right angles of the basilicanum structure. So there we have our finished kit-bashed pieces, and boy have they come together well. I really love how much these stand out with that kind of real mixed media kit-bashed vibe. They are going to be perfect for our big narrative mission conclusion. And working through these two custom builds has really helped me to get to know the kits. But of course, this was all built in Australia 2 years ago, and now I live in Middle Earth over the ditch in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Now when I was getting ready for the move, I knew the Dawn of War Warhammer was on the card, so even though I left most of my scenery back in Australia, including the rest of the Imperial City that these orc buildings are supposed to work with, I did post over the all-important orc skyscraper kit bashes, but they didn't really survive the journey too well.
I'm literally so excited to be building orc terrain again because, you know, it's so haphazard, it's all junk, it's just completely ramshackle crap that's thrown together. So even though, yeah, sure, these beautiful, well-designed pieces that I already built are a bit bashed up, but I don't have to put them back together exactly the same way, I just gotta make them look good. So I'm gonna begin my repair job, be a big orc mech and get this building in tip-top shape, and then we'll combine it with what Bo and Bodhi have been working on for me and bring our orc city together. Let's get started on saving these.
I grabbed basically every type of glue that I could find in my half-assembled new workshop and got to work, tacking and sticking and jamming bits together, trying to lock all the broken pieces back into one cohesive whole. This super modular structure needs to be strong enough that it can take the weight of not only the crazy kit-bashed orc building, but also an army of orcs garrisoned within.
So this thing is an absolute behemoth. Five stories of orc skyscraper. I think it's gonna be a good big centerpiece for our orc city. Let's go and grab all of our other bits and pieces and have a look at how they're gonna go against it, start to build the city together.
Now, our Dawn of War rules require a lot of units to be able to change their loadouts during the course of the game. Sergeants can upgrade their chainswords to power swords and even power fists, their bolt pistols to plasma, Marines get new heavy and special weapons.
Light of the Emperor!
And even vehicles have complex loadout options like the Space Marine Predator, which can swap out its autocannon and heavy bolters for mighty las cannons.
Now, I didn't want to have to buy triples of everything to do all of those loadouts, so we got some help from today's sponsor, the almighty Magna Baron, the official sponsor of the Dawn of War Warhammer campaign, because magnets, they just solve everything.
If you need magnets for your wargaming, then look no further than the magnabaron.com, your DIY super magnet home. MagnaBaron.com have a huge range of wargaming magnets which are super powerful and even have specific kits for notoriously difficult to magnetize models, magnetized movement trays, and magnetized collapsible flight stands for the epic travel wargaming experience.
I challenge you to find a better feeling in all of wargaming than the pure bliss of this moment. Magnetic perfection.
So to score some boss wargaming magnets for all your army needs, hit up the magnabaron.com, link down in the description, and a big shout out to Constantine who runs the Magna Baron. He's an absolute legend. It's not often you'll find a sponsor willing to support content on a brand new channel, so go and show him some love. Now, the other important care package I sent over from Australia was my big old pile of shame of orc scenery. When the new edition of Kill Team launched, I went in with a bunch of mates who wanted the kill teams, and I nabbed all the scenery. So I've got quite a little hoard, and I set Bo and Bodhi to work clipping and cleaning this little mountain of plastic crack. Once I realized there was no time for further kit bashing, Bo volunteered to assemble them all.
He's melting on camera.
Some little
There we go.
But to spice things up even more, I've also printed off a bunch of Orc-inspired STL files sent to me by the lads over at Eons of Battle. I've got their Patreon link down below where you can pick up the files if you'd like to build your own little Orc civilization. And the ingenious thing about these pieces is that while they're unique, they totally suit the Octarius terrain, and the lads have even used the same joiners so that the pieces mesh together really nicely. Bodhi and I cleaned and assembled those, and then it was time to have a look at our full horde of Orc structures.
So I've had a bit of a play with all of our Orc stuff. I've kind of mocked up a few different formations. We can build these big fortresses, we can slap stuff together, and we've got two kind of operational parts. Our Octarius sets, the GW plastic, and then these 3D printed add-ons from Eons of Battle. So these are like extra little corners. We've got some doors. There's inside corners as well, which let us make kind of sort of cool sticky outy combinations, so that it's all a lot more flexible once I add those pieces in. And yeah, look, there is some flexibility. They're not modular vertically. You can sort of stack maybe one on top of another one like this over here, or maybe we can get one of these kind of silos and whack it on the top. That's really about the extent of the verticality, which is why I went mental kind of custom bashing that skyscraper. But with these, they're perfect. They're our Orc buildings. They're on the ground. They're going to be amazing for Dawn of War. The question now is, what do I glue? They all lock together really modularly. We see this here, that just kind of locks in. Even these beautiful printed pieces mesh quite nicely. Obviously the GW plastic is seamless. But do I glue any of these in sub-assemblies, or do I leave them all as completely separate pieces, which I can then pull apart and reconfigure every single time I need a new layout for Orc buildings? That is my decision. I really don't know. I don't know what to do. Yeah, I don't know. Let's just keep going.
I decided it was most useful to just keep everything separate, at least for the time being. So I grabbed all of my pieces and threw them down outside and got ready for priming. But how should I prime them? I never painted the original piece, but I did prime it. So I jumped back to my old video to see what method I had used. I gave everything a zenithal prime, working from black to a mid-tone grey to give everything some nice definition, and then put all the pieces together for one final light source blast from above with a light grey. It is really useful having like a video record of almost everything I've ever done in the last few years, because if I ever can't remember how I made something, it's all right there to watch. Okay, so a pretty standard process. I grabbed some rattle cans and of course my mask, and I got to work slapping down first a really solid coverage of black. This layer is pretty important, so I tried to get it everywhere, the tops, the bottoms, all over the Orc scenery. Then I found a whole host of extra barricades and Orc rubble that Bodhi and Bo had cleaned up for me, and decided they could be pretty useful for making different types of buildings, so I gave them a prime in black too. Then I hit everything with 2 stages of grey, my mid-tone dark grey and then the lighter pass, and I applied these in that same top-down zenithal method as our original piece. If you're enjoying all of the new Dawn of War Warhammer content, you can support the madness by checking out my Patreon down below. We've even got a special Zorphammer tier that gets you access to all of the rules as they are written, or if you're getting excited and just buying a bunch of plastic crack for 40k, Middle-earth, or anything in between, make sure you use my affiliate links down below to get the best prices, and it sends me a little kickback to support Zorpazorp. And if you're shopping at Gap Games in Australia, simply use the code ZORP at checkout, and you'll not only send me that kickback, but also get a little extra discount for yourself across the entire store. After a good soaking in the sun, I dumped everything into my live stream studio and started to get the painting bench ready to rock and roll, because I have got basically 0 time to get these painted, and that means it is airbrush time. The scheme is going to be pretty simple. I've gathered up some metallics from the Vallejo Air range, and then 2 of the bright red and yellow contrast paints for a nice splash of orky colour. First I grabbed Vallejo Air Rust, which is sort of a coppery bronze, and started slapping that down everywhere I had like a gas canister or one of those orky tanks. I started off on my hero piece, as it's got a little bit of everything, so it's a really nice test piece to establish my scheme, but then I got to work on just the absolute horde of other pieces that I've got covering the bench. I decided the oil refinery parts from the Orc terrain are going to make the perfect power generators for the Orc faction in Dawn of War Warhammer, so they got some brassy love, and then it was time for our first silver layer, War STL, and I started blasting that down. Now, with the next 2 silver layers, there's not really that much of a complex method going on. I'm just trying to pick out random details, really, and create as much metallic contrast as I can. We want all these details to read. On some pieces, I'd hit the beams, sometimes specific panels. Painting the same piece sort of like over and over again in a row really helped me build up speed and not to have to think about too much sort of what ended up being the exact shade of silver. After steel, I then changed to the gunmetal, which is a darker silver, to help with those contrasting elements, and I just repeated the exact same process, and we were left with this. It's sort of working, but the pieces aren't really screaming out Orc yet, so it's time for, of course, a splash of color. I grabbed my Baal red contrast and started picking out key details. There are some really obvious things like the kind of orky bits and pieces that need some color, but mostly it's about making sure that each piece just has the right amount of color to make it all read. So I just paint sometimes random panels with a splash of red, and then I used that exact same process with the yellow, picking it out, building up a patchwork of orkiness with mixed metals and of course our red and yellow. Then we got to the layer that basically saved the whole paint job, and it is of course the washes. I grabbed some enamel and just washed it heavily over the whole piece, really liberally. This of course added lovely recessed shadows that make all of the detail read and all of those different bits and pieces really sing, but the enamel was also really old and almost dry. I had to kind of smoosh it together, mixing it in with thinner, and so when it went down it was quite dirty and gross, and it looked like some sort of wonderful smearage and weathering all in one big sticky layer. I left it all out in the sun to fully dry and then racked them up in my filming studio shelves ready to be deployed into Dawn of War Warhammer. And then when we started filming the very next day, it was just an absolute joy seeing the Orc civilization get built up on the table and then of course getting exterminated by my mighty blood ravens. Hit up Zorphammer, link down in the description and the top comment to see the scenery in action, and I will see you guys in the next one.